Hi there, my name is Marley and welcome back to my booktube channel. Today I'm going to be filming my March wrap-up. And I'm filming on my new phone. I'm trying out this cinematic camera style, so I think it's like blurring the background. Give me your feedback. Do we like this? I don't know. Okay, so basically I'm going to talk about all the books that I read in the month of March, as I always do in my wrap-ups. Let's start out with some stats. My stats are always kind of similar month to month, but let's just look at them anyways. So in the month of March, I read a total of 8 books, which ended up being around 3,114 pages. And I had an average rating of 3.75, so pretty good, kind of average. In terms of my genres that I read, 75% of the books I read were thrillers, so love that for me. It's my favorite genre. Then I read 1 historical fiction and 1 romance. For format, we had another even split where it was 4 ebooks and 4 physical books. For the audience or like age range, I read 5 adult books and then 3 YA. For author gender, which I've just started tracking this year, I read from all female authors. Love that for International Women's Month. In terms of author status, I read from 5 repeat authors and 3 new to me authors. And then for the years published that I read from, I actually read 4 books that are coming out or are already out in 2023. I actually read 4 arcs, so they're all not out yet actually. I read 2 books from 2022, 1 book from 2021, and then 1 book from 2017. So mostly newer books or arcs this month. Now let's get into the book reviews. I always talk about them in the order of my lowest rated to my highest rated. So let's get into it. The worst book that I read this month, unfortunately, was one of those arcs that I read. I read it for a reading vlog, and it was actually a whole arc reading vlog. So all the books I read in it were YA thriller arcs, but the worst one was definitely Someone Is Always Watching by Kelley Armstrong. This is an author I have read from before, but I read her YA fantasy series like back when I was in like 8th grade or something. This was about a teenage girl who goes to this kind of prep school, and one of her best friends all of a sudden starts acting really weird, kind of having a meltdown at school, claiming that there's, cameras everywhere watching them. And that kind of sparks our main character and some of her friends to investigate like what's going on. Why did her friends suddenly kind of have this breakdown? What's going on at their school as their principal also turned up dead? And then there's also this other side plot where our main character is getting emailed from someone anonymously, kind of hinting that there's someone in her life that she doesn't fully know, like that's keeping secrets. So we're just kind of unraveling that. I'm trying to be very vague with this description because from the start, I just really felt like it was obvious where this book was going. And obviously something you want from thriller mysteries is, a mystery. You want to have twists that you can't guess. And I had a bunch of different theories kind of going through my head. Ones that could have been interesting, ones that honestly could have been problematic. But the author just didn't go with any of those. And it just kind of was very straightforward. I felt like she gave us the answers very early on. There was, I think, 1 twist that impressed me, but unfortunately I was overall let down. I also was not a fan of the writing style. I felt like it just wasn't great. So I ended up giving this one a 2.5 star rating. Another arc that unfortunately was a little bit disappointing for me was Dark Corners by Goldin. I believe this one comes out in August, and this is actually one I didn't read in that vlog. This one I actually just read the most recently. If you don't know, Goldin has put out a few thrillers in the last couple years, and this is actually a follow-up to one of her previous books called Night Swim. And she's starting this kind of series that is following our main character, Rachel Crawl, who is a true crime podcaster. So if you read Night Swim, you probably remember it follows a true crime podcaster, Rachel, as she follows this rape trial that's going on. So in this book, we're seeing her again, but this time she gets called in by the FBI to go talk to this prisoner who is in prison, but he's getting out soon. Basically, her name just got brought up in this investigation where basically there is a social media influencer who has gone missing. But before she went missing, she visited this prisoner in jail, and Rachel's name was brought up in their conversation. So the FBI bring Rachel in to see what she knows about the investigation, and she just kind of gets wrapped up in it from there. Of course, she's like an investigative journalist. She wants to, you know, help out the FBI and help figure out what's going on, where this missing social media influencer has gone, as it seems like the prisoner that she visited in jail might have had something to do with it. So it was an interesting premise for sure. I was very intrigued right from the start. I really do love Megan Goldin's writing. So even though overall I ended up being a bit disappointed with this book and only giving it a 3-star rating, I really do love her writing. It's so quick for me to read. It's so addicting. So I will continue reading her books. But unfortunately, this is another case of it just being too predictable for me. Like, we had multiple points of view, and one of the points of view that we had from the start just revealed way too much. Like, I felt like I knew kind of who the antagonist was the entire time, rather than it being a mystery or a reveal. The mystery, I guess, was just finding out how things happened, but you kind of already know the who and you're figuring out the why as it went. So I was not a huge fan of that. Social media influencers or content creators are also a huge element in this book. As you can imagine, the social media influencer going missing, the fact that Rachel is kind of a content creator, you know, with her podcast. There's a lot of focus on being a social media influencer, especially when Rachel ends up going to this social media influencer like convention. And I just feel like the author portrayed them in a really negative light. Now, I don't necessarily love all content creators. Like, I know that you can like make fun of them, like the really big ones, big social media influencers, but like I just didn't love the light that she was shedding on them. It was like very negative, and just she clearly had her like opinions about social media influencers that she was trying to get across, and I didn't necessarily love how she did that. So that was another kind of point away from it. Next up, we have 4 Found Dead by Natalie D. Richards. This was another arc. Unfortunately, the arcs are kind of flopping this one. But yeah, this is a YA thriller. I had never read from this author before. The title kind of says it. We start out the book knowing that 4 people are going to end up dead at this movie theater. Basically, there's a bunch of teenagers that are working the last shift at this theater before it gets shut down. And we just know that 4 of them are going to end up dead at the end of the night. The power ends up going out, things like that end up happening, and we find, you know, our first person that has been murdered, which is kind of the catalyst to this whole crazy night, where all the rest of the kids think that it is their manager that has killed her. So they are on the run from their manager. It's definitely like a survival type of thriller where they're just trying to survive in this mall. They're like locked in and trying to get away from this manager, and I just felt like it was, again, like too straightforward. I thought there was going to be more of a twist regarding who the murderer was and why, but again, I just felt like it was very obvious from the start. Sometimes things are made more obvious in YA thrillers because it is for a younger audience, but at this point, like, I've read so many YA thrillers that have been genuinely shocking to me, so I can't really use that as an excuse. I did end up liking the characters by the end and some of the relationship stuff that ended up going on, but overall I was disappointed in kind of the thrillery aspects of it. So I did end up giving it a 3.5 rating. Finally, we have a book that was not an arc, and that was A Brush with Love by Mazey Eddings. This is an adult romance book. Of course, it is a companion series that I probably will be continuing with because I did end up giving this a 4-star rating, so pretty good. The reason I was so interested in this one is because it has to do with dentistry, and my job is kind of in the dental industry. So I was just kind of interested because of that, and I also had heard some good things about it. My friend actually annotated this before giving it to me, so it made it a really entertaining read. It probably made me enjoy it more than I normally would have. Anyway, for the plot, we are following 2 dental students. One of them, the girl, is named Harper, and she is very much like the type A, really good student, like super passionate and dedicated to her field. She actually wants to go into oral surgery, just that type of character, but she has a lot of anxiety. Then we have Dan is the guy, and he is not as passionate about dentistry. We find out more about his background, but basically he feels like he sort of has to go into the field because of his parents and just that whole thing, like having to live the parents' dream instead of his own. So we have them, and it is definitely a slow burn romance, but it's kind of weird because it felt slow burn, but at the same time it didn't, because I feel like they instantly like loved each other, but it's just that they didn't really like act on it for a really long time. So that was kind of a complaint of mine. Like, I liked that they didn't, you know, do anything. They really were building the friendship, but internally, like they were loving each other right away. Another complaint, we are hearing from both of their points of view. And if you've heard me talk about romance before, you know I prefer only one person's point of view. I don't like hearing about the straight man's point of view in a romance. So I didn't love that, but it wasn't like too terrible. Obviously, I ended up giving it 4 stars, and mainly the reason I liked it so much was the anxiety rep. There were definitely a lot of passages that I really related to. It is very upsetting. It's one of those romances that has like a lot of deep stuff to it as well, similar to Emily Henry. Those are just the types of romances I enjoy when it's not just all silly, goofy, smutty. I like when there's some depth to it, so this definitely had that. But speaking of funny stuff, another reason I really loved it was Harper's friends. As I said, Harper's kind of like a stressed out character, but all the rest of her friends were like way more outgoing and super hilarious that I had to rate it higher because of them, especially at the end when they were like helping Harper, you know, deal with the third act conflict and stuff. And it does make me kind of excited to keep reading in this companion series because I know it's going to follow Harper's friends who really stood out in this book. So overall, I would recommend this romance, but it definitely wasn't a favorite. I don't think I mentioned it also has very cringy writing sometimes it worked and it was really funny, and sometimes it was like really cringe that like it was really funny seeing my friends' reactions. Another 4-star read from me this month was False Witness by Karin Slaughter, the queen of thrillers. This was her release from, was it 2021? Yes, 2021, but just getting into it now. But yeah, of course, this was a fantastic book, fantastic thriller, and of course it was very upsetting, because all of Karin's books are upsetting, graphic, deal with sexual assault, look up trigger warnings if that's something you need to do. Also, like all of her books, it does deal with lawyers and sisters, which honestly, I love that stuff. So we are following these 2 sisters. We start out the book with like a flashback to like a very traumatic event that these sisters deal with, and then we flash forward to when they are adults and one of the sisters has become a lawyer. She's actually a criminal defense lawyer. This one criminal or accused rapist requests her to represent him, and then it's kind of like, ooh, why is he requesting her? Like, what's the connection? We pretty early find out what the connection is, and it becomes a bit of a like blackmailing situation where she's having to defend this like terrible person, and he has some like information that she doesn't want revealed. The other sister has become a drug addict, a heroin addict. It's really sad, but she is also involved in like the stuff that's going on, and it's basically these 2 sisters like trying to take down this terrible man. Yeah, it's pretty exciting. I do wish it was a little bit twistier though. Karin Slaughter's writing is so good that like it's fine if it's not that twisty. It's just like so gritty, so interesting. The character work is great, the relationship stuff, and it just really tugs at your heartstrings. Always the sister relationship, I really was a fan of it, and her thrillers are always on the chunkier side as well, but I still always read them as quick as any other thriller. Like it's just, they're just very good, but also you gotta be in the right headspace for them. But yeah, it's a 4-star for me. Now we had the best arc that I read this month, and that was Tell Me What Really Happened by Chelsea Sedoti. And I gave this one 4 stars as well. This is a YA thriller, and it's told in a really cool way, similar to Daisy Jones, because I know that's a hot topic right now, in the way that it's an interview style. So we are seeing the police interview these 4 teenagers who were out camping this one weekend, and one of their friends is currently missing, potentially dead. And so the police are questioning them to find out what happened on this weekend, what led to this terrible incident. This was just such an entertaining way to consume a thriller story. It's almost like Frederick Bachman's Anxious People 2, right? It kind of had that same sort of dynamic, but it was also very funny. Like, I don't know who this author is, haven't read from her before, but I definitely will again because her characters were all really unique, all really great. They kind of fell into some similar tropes, but not really. And as I said, just some really funny lines and likable characters. I feel like the mystery was pretty good. Again, does deal a little bit with social media influencer stuff, which seems to be a trend, which makes sense. Yeah, don't have like too much more to say. If you want to see my live reaction to this book, definitely check out my ARC reading blog from earlier in the month. But yeah, I really adored this one. Then I also read I Found You by Lisa Jewell, my thriller queen. It's been a while since I picked something up from her, but this is one of her backlist of books that I have and just hadn't gotten to yet. I ended up giving this one 4 stars. I feel like you cannot give anything less to Lisa Jewell. This is one I was tempted to rate higher, but I just didn't end up doing it. But fun story, I went on a trip this month and I finished this book completely on a plane. So I read like the first half on the way there, second half on the way back. Like I just couldn't stop reading. It was so good. Her writing, great. But basically the plot of this one is that we're following this woman who like lives on the beach. She has a bunch of kids. Her life's kind of a mess, but she sees this man sitting out on the beach like all day, and she kind of goes up to him and takes him in and finds out that he cannot remember anything about his life. He's in like some sort of fugue state, amnesia, whatever. He does not remember who he is. And so she takes him in, and we have that storyline where she is helping him, kind of trying to figure out who he is. Then we have this other woman whose husband has recently disappeared. And so we're seeing her, you know, be worried, calling the police, trying to figure out where he went. We are also seeing some flashbacks to a family from years before that like was vacationing on this beach. So we have these different timelines, and I love that in thrillers, like having these different timelines and trying to figure out how they all connect or how all these characters connect. And it's not necessarily like the obvious thing that you think it's gonna be. And Lisa Jewell, again, speaking of characters, like she's just so good at creating these really likable characters that you're rooting for. Her thrillers all kind of have like romances in them or like other kind of deep relationships as well, kind of like Karin Slaughter too. You really care about other things than just the twists and like the killing, murdering stuff. Like you care about the other stuff going on too. Yeah, I just really adored this one. It was very disturbing though. I'm just remembering that. It was very disturbing to me. It was hard to read in that way. And I feel like it could have been a little twistier. I think I remember, again, I come up with all these theories when I'm reading, and then when they don't come to fruition or like the twist doesn't match what I'm thinking, I can get a little bit disappointed. So that was the only thing with this one, but otherwise I would definitely recommend. And my final book of the month and my 1 5-star read was Carrie Soto's Back by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Yes, loved it. Like my queen. If you don't know, I've given Daisy Jones and Evelyn Hugo 5 stars. Malibu Rising, it disappointed me a little bit. I think I only gave that one 4 stars, but we are back. Carrie Soto's back, and so are the 5 stars for Taylor Jenkins Reid. Like, I really love this, and I wasn't sure if I was going to, just coming off of Malibu Rising, and also the fact this is about tennis. I'm not a sporty person, I'm not a tennis person, but let me tell you, you do not have to be. In case you for some reason have not heard, this was my historical fiction read, because what year is this? The 80s? Anyways, Carrie Soto was a really amazing tennis player, the best in the world when she was younger. She had this amazing career, had the record for the number of Grand Slams, and you know, she's retired. She hasn't been playing for like maybe 5 or 10 years, and then there's this new up-and-coming tennis player that is about to beat her record. So Carrie Soto is like, you know what? I'm gonna come back, I'm gonna come out of retirement, and I'm gonna get another Grand Slam so that this girl doesn't beat my record. So you can tell what type of character she is. She definitely reminds me of like the Evelyn Hugo type of character, where she's literally just out for herself. Like she's so competitive, she wants to be the best, and she works hard for it. She does what she has to do. She definitely, you know, is a flawed character. A lot of people hate her because they don't see her as like a good sport. But if you read from her point of view, like you'll absolutely love her. She's so funny. And there's also a really sweet romance in this book that I loved. There's also a huge focus on the father-daughter relationship between Carrie and her father, who's also her coach. That was really amazing to read as well. This just has so many good things going for it. It's so great. It really took me by surprise. So I absolutely recommend it to everyone. Like if you've read Taylor Jenkins Reid's other books, definitely read this. Even if you haven't, like my favorite book of the month by far. I did watch the Daisy Jones and the Six adaptation as well. Absolutely loved that. Can't wait to keep seeing all of her stories be adapted because they're just great. They're just really entertaining and heartbreaking and awesome. Yeah. So that's my wrap up for the month. Thank you so much for watching, especially if you made it to the end. Be sure to leave me a comment if you have any thoughts on these books or thoughts on my new camera quality. I feel like it's looking pretty good. And be sure to subscribe if you've not already. Hope you have a great month, a great spring. Yay, finally better weather. And I'll see you in my next video very soon. Bye.